the telly. We move on. Experts from the Centre of Economics and Business Research have warned today that the pandemic has, as predicted, created a middle-class unemployment crisis that will get much worse in time for Christmas. In the 10 worst affected areas, there are just under 140,000 people on out-of-work benefits. That's about 75,000 more than before the pandemic. It's a big jump. And economists predict that 1 million jobs are going to be lost in the next 9 weeks after the furlough scheme ends on cue on Saturday. Now, the hardest hit areas so far look to be Slough, Luton, Peterborough and Brighton. This is classic Middle England, real middle-class territory. In Slough, which of course is massively reliant on Heathrow, and look at what's happened to Heathrow, the number looking for work has more than tripled in 1 year, from 2.6% of the population, the working age population, to 8.5%. In other words, that's from about 2,500 to 8,100. In Luton, which is EasyJet's headquarters, the number has risen from just over 4,000 to about 11,500. I mean, these are bad figures, and they're going to get worse. The analysis excludes London and Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool, which currently have around 600,000 claiming out-of-work benefits. That's up from 250,000 a year ago. To focus on the economic devastation in towns and, of course, regional cities, which typically find it harder to recover from any recession whenever they strike. Now, these figures are drawn from the Office of National Statistics data. They show the increase in the claimant count in 12 months to September, along with those claiming universal credit, looking for work, and those on the job seekers allowance. So it's bad news. Let's talk to Jonathan Davis, economist and presenter of Booms and Bust podcast. Hi, nice to talk to you, Jonathan. Well, I mean, the figures are bad, but I guess we knew this was going to happen.
It's interesting you say that, because a few people like me have been saying it since April, since lockdown started. The officials and the as I call them, the bow tie economists that you quote from, they didn't start talking about this kind of stuff till June or July. I've been saying since April that lockdown would create between 1.5 and 3 million unemployed. And the first sentence you said there was that the pandemic is creating this. No, the politicians are creating this, but everyone's blaming it on the pandemic. The pandemic, as you well know, Richard, is just a virus. It's a cold. They call it a pandemic to make it sound absolutely dreadful, but the numbers don't stack up. So this lockdown is creating the biggest economic recession in 100 years, and it's the politicians to blame.
You're absolutely right to talk about, you didn't use this word, but you were really talking about the spin that the politicians have put on this from the start. And it goes on. I mean, each week and month has a new bit of spin. And the one that really stuck in my throat a couple of weeks ago, and it's still out there, is the grading of these regional lockdowns, 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3 is fine. But why do we have to start on medium risk and then go to high risk and finish on very high risk? I've never known a sliding scale of that kind that doesn't begin with low, whether it's on your microwave, on your car radio, whatever, or your central heating. You start with low, you go to medium, and you finish on high. But they started on medium, went to high, and ended on very high. That's naked manipulation, isn't it, of our emotions and our fear factors?
The mainstream media have been fear-mongering from day one. Every day, 24 hours a day. If you breathe, you're about to die. The reality is, and I don't think anyone is talking about this, in England and Wales, the number of people who have died, unfortunately, from COVID-19, another coronavirus, we've had coronaviruses for decades, is just over 5 a day. Now, I can tell you, because I'm 57, and in 57 years, I've never seen an economic lockdown for something that killed 5 people a day. So there's something very sinister going on here, and it's not to do with a virus.
What do you think is going on? I mean, as a journalist, I've been scratching my head since around about June. I genuinely don't understand what's happening in this. It's not just this country. This is on the whole, a global governmental response to something which is not the bubonic plague, a very serious virus. Nobody's doubting that. awful for people who get seriously ill, have long COVID, and of course the very small but nevertheless real minority who are killed by it. It's just awful, and what awful luck for them to be the ones to suffer like that when the vast majority are either symptom-free or have very, very mild symptoms. It's just dreadful for them, and we have nothing but sympathy for them, and we must do everything to protect them and to compensate them for their loss. But as you say, you've never seen a reaction like this to something which has caused this level of fatalities. And it's happening around the planet. What do you think? What's happened to us as a global society, do you think?
Well, every year, as your listeners know, the 0.1% elite get together in the mountains in winter at Davos. And I, rather facetiously, I call them the Party of Davos. And Klaus, I'm afraid I've forgotten his surname just off the top of my head, the originator of the Davos group, and indeed still the chairman, he has said it. Go on to YouTube, search for the Great Reset for Klaus, whatever, you'll find it, Davos. He's actually saying it to camera that, from my memory, to paraphrase, COVID-19 gives us a small window of opportunity for the Great Reset. Practically every country in the world is taking on board this absolute arrant nonsense where unfortunately our whole world is being re-altered. And as far as I can tell, and look at the unemployment stats that are going to be coming through in the next months, for example, for the benefit of the 0.1%. And by the way, this is no communist speaking here. I'm a free market capitalist.
You're a free market capitalist, yes, absolutely. Well, I hadn't considered that matter, and I would reserve my position on it. I'd like to have a look at that podcast and come back on it, because it forgive me for saying it, it does slightly smack of a conspiracy theory, but I know you're not a conspiracist. But I think that's something I'd like to make my own mind up on. But you've drawn it to everyone's attention. We're all free to Google this, go to any search engine and look at it, and form our own conclusions. I personally think that very often we're talking about the politics of the personal in these matters. And I do wonder, and I don't say this with any aggression or criticism, but I do wonder if the fact that our Prime Minister very nearly died, I mean, he was very close to death in hospital earlier this year, I wonder if that's informed his reaction to it, and quite understandably has made him perhaps rather more frightened of the virus than the vast majority of other people who haven't had it or have had it very mildly are. What do you think? Am I on a hiding to nothing there, do you think?
No, I don't think you are. I think if we cast our mind back to March, as you said to Dr. Ellie 10 minutes ago, the UK was just on the point of not having a lockdown, along with Sweden and a few other countries. And then the Italy thing broke up. There was a massive explosion in numbers of cases. Notice the number of deaths didn't rise, but the number of cases did. And that was because of half a dozen flights from Wuhan. That is no coincidence. Secondly,
I have to speed you up a bit here. We're almost out of time, but do carry on.
The media picked up on it. And thirdly, then, as you say, the Prime Minister caught COVID. So yes, it was an agglomeration of events, and they basically lost their nerve.
Jonathan, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for being on Talk Radio with me, Richard Madeley, sitting in for Mike. It is now 10:50.